Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Sports. Not a good weekend for South African teams in the European competitions, although we do still have 3 out of our 5 South African teams in European competitions, but there's 2 of them in the Sharks and the Bulls have dropped down from the Champions Cup into the Challenge Cup round of 16, whilst the Lions hammered Dragons this weekend to get their place into the round of 16 of the Challenge Cup. And quite interesting in terms of what some of the coaches have been saying, for example, and watching the matches this weekend, it kind of shows why South Africa are going to continue to struggle in these competitions for the next couple of years at least, while they try and build their squads and build a winning, environment to try and then compete on all different fronts, especially with the travel and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, we saw a Stormers side that was very rotated, and a lot of people going after John Dobson for the rotation, asking, where was Mario Ebok, where was Warwick Land, where was Ben Jason Dixon, where was Dion Free? Although we don't know the fully, version in terms of their fitness and the likes of that. You do sort of watch them in the bench or in sort of the crowd this weekend and think, in a match where they almost pulled off a victory against a racing side, which had some very talented players, like Owen Farrell, for example. Leonard Gag was absolutely tremendous. You wondered, if they would have played a couple of bigger, sort of more senior players, could they have gotten the result, for example? And then could they be sitting in the Champions Cup, it's round of 16, or at least the Challenge Cup round of 16? Now, similarly, the Sharks did not name a bad side this past weekend, and to try and get into the next round of the Champions Cup. It had the likes of, an all Springbok front row, for example. Grant Williams was there. Isiakli starting, obviously, Jason Jenkins. You've got the likes of Kanya coming off the bench. However, you still look at that side, for example, and they're taking on Bordeaux. And it was quite interesting when you look at the two sides. Yes, you've got a Grant Williams, a Sia Khaleesi, for example, Bongi Manambi, Intuka Punu. These are all current sort of Springboks. You've got a Trevin Yakani, Pepsi Boot Lazy made his debut last year. Off the bench, you had the likes of a Dylan Richardson, who's internationally capped, a Lekanyama, Jaden Hendricks. But the problem is, you look at the sort of the level down, and this is where we talk about the depth. It's not just about having, Springboks back, for example, your Andre Esterhazens, if he was available, your Eben Etzebest and the likes of that. What is the level of the players down from that? What is the level of your non-Springbok players? And I think that is where we're quite clearly seeing the gulf in quality between the teams. And this is what Jake White said in his post-match press conference. He basically said, we need better players. He said we need bigger squads, but better players in those squads, where we can basically rotate players week in, week out. And he actually mentioned the Springboks in terms of their rotation policy. And that's what Jake White says we need at franchise level. He wants to have a squad of 35 to 40 players who are all very similar level, where it doesn't really matter where he's rotating, And I mean, for example, the Sharks with their scrum off depth, Grant Williams for Jaden Hendricks, that's good depth. But when you've got, Lorenzo Julius, who's a very, very talented player, but he's like 20 years old, next to Francois Fenta, that's your center combination. Lacania, I'm still not maybe looking like the player he was, but there just seems to be a big drop off in quality in the sort of the players. As soon as somebody's injured, for example, who's the next person that comes up. So, for example, I think Cornet Roll is a great player, but the gulf of quality between Eben Etzebeth versus Cornet Roll is kind of the issue. And that's why these squads are slowly starting to build. So bringing back like a Jason Jenkins, for example, adds good depth. But I mean, you look at that Bordeaux side this weekend, and you take away, your French stars like your Maxime Luchu, your Mathieu Jalabert, for example, your Murfana, the likes of that, Nicolas Deportiere, Dame Penno, he scored 6 tries, slightly ridiculous to be honest. But you look at the quality around the squad, and you've got a Guido Petty, for example, who is a phenomenal young lock from Argentina. You've got the likes of a Joe Carberry playing at fullback. Off the bench, though, you've got Lachlan Swinton, international. What have you got? Rowan Jans van Rensburg, for example. Ben Tamafuma. You've got some really, really good players coming off the bench, for example, and the depth in the French teams is insane. I mean, you look at that Racing side, for example, as well, and missing quite a few players, and yet they had so much quality across that side. And this is the big thing, I think you look at the French sides, they've got such big salary caps and budgets, and they've got such stacked squads that is so difficult for us to try and compete against squads like that when we just don't have the depth. Now the question is, how are we going to get that depth? And I think again, we need to stop freaking out about our performances this season. It is the third season in, but just remember, we're still not seeing any money from these competitions. We are still not seeing the financial gain. I think we are seeing it from a rugby point of view. I do think that we're seeing us really sort of get exposed to different sort of rugby and the likes of that. but we're yet to see the financial benefit. Now, we're going to start seeing that financial benefit in the next couple of years, and there's the equity around the corner. But what I think is, when you look at those top 14 sides, you can start to see a template of the type of squads we need to get. Now, the good news is we're never going to have the kind of budgets that the France have. We don't necessarily need them. We don't necessarily need that kind of big budgets. We just need bigger budgets to try and tie down more of our players. We produce more rugby players than anybody else in the world, country-wise, and that's what I'm saying. You look at Bordeaux, and they had Carly Sardi, they had Ryan Janssen van Rensburg, and so they had two South Africans in their 23, for example. You look at Racing, and they had Hachiba Diamani, they had Tristan Taylor, they had off the bench even Marvin Mazabuko, for example. You looked at Stade Francais, and Joe Jones was playing, and that's without the likes of JD van der Mes and Jeremy Ward. Almost every single French top 14 side has a couple of South Africans. Dylan Lates was again fantastic this weekend. So, the amount of quality South African players we've got is out there, and we are producing very good young players. Obviously, it's about retaining them for longer. And I also I personally think we should be looking at other nations as well. I don't think bringing in players from Argentina, for example, or from Italy or Scotland, the likes of that, I don't think that suddenly devalues our franchises. I think, the whole idea of an international player is, preventing a young player from South coming through. I think we need to get away from that to a certain degree. We have got our players playing all over the world, and they are, being molded into great rugby players. We don't have to sit there and say it's a zero-sum game. If we want our franchise to do well, we need to have the best squads. Now, you look at somebody like a Guido Petty, for example, and you think, if Sharks had a Guido Petty instead of a Cornerell, for example, the difference in quality over there, and he's a very experienced, Argentine lock, been around the block, would add a lot of time to depth. That is the kind of players who I think, if we had a couple of players at our unions, I'm not saying, we're not going to be like France, for example, sitting there, 7, 8, 9 international players in their sort of starting 15. But I don't see any reason why we can't start adding different sort of players of different nations into our sides and just try and basically raise the bar. At the end of the day, you've got some players who are up there, but you've got some players who are down there, sorry. And you kind of want to get more to a bit of a more sort of even, where basically the lowest level is a little bit higher. That's the big thing. How do we raise the bar for our weakened sides? It's all very well the Sharks going into a Challenge Cup final like they did last year, went a bit of a run with, an incredible side. We've got like 12 Springboks in the 23, for example, current Springboks. But how do you then make sure that when they're not playing, you've then got players who are not even going to be as good, but are good enough to get results? Because that's our problem. As soon as our franchises have injuries, and the Sharks have got a bit of an injury crisis at the moment, Storm has also got a lot of injuries. But you can just see the difference in quality is just chalk and cheese, and that's the biggest problem. Is there's too big of a difference between some of the team's best sides and their secondary sides. And the more you can start building that depth up, and the depth doesn't mean more players; it means a better quality of players throughout the squad. It means your backups are better players than what you have had previously. So I think if you get that right, I think we can still compete. But at the end of the day, we've now got 3 second sides of the Challenge Cup in the round of 16. If they were to all go through, then that would be 3 out of 8 sides in the quarterfinals, and maybe we can potentially look at another Challenge Cup winner. I don't know if that would be viewed as a successful season, for example, for like the Sharks, even if they were to go back-to-back Challenge Cup winners. They want to be in the Champions Cup. They want to be competing for the Champions Cup. Jake White's been very frank about the fact that he says that the Bulls can't compete for the Champions Cup because they don't have the depth and the quality of players. So a difficult weekend, but once again, you continue to sort of see what makes these teams so successful. You look at your Toulouse, for example, and it's not just for me the fact that they've got your Thomas Ramos, your main Intermax, your Anton Duponts and the likes. It's just the quality of play across the squad is so good, and the quality of their reserves and their youth players is so good. Their recruitment is so good, and I think there's a lot that we can try and learn because we've got the academy, we've got the school system, which is our academy. How do we pull up the best players? How do we keep them? How do we actually identify other players from around the world to try and enhance our franchises? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.